Welcome. We're excited to have you participate in the Staff Search Committee training for Miami University. First and foremost, we want to thank each of you for agreeing to serve on the search committee on behalf of the President, Provost, and Board of Trustees. While only the President or Provost can make an offer of employment, we know it's your work on this search that is critical to get to that point and have the best, most inclusively excellent pool of candidates. During this session, we'll be focusing on bias and policies in relation to the search process. We know that all positions are long-term investments in many ways, for each division and the university, since ideally, after a staff member joins Miami, they will be here for many years. You hopefully will also already have a plan for supporting the success of the new hire through a clear onboarding and mentoring structure and other areas in the department by the time a search becomes public. Now, before we begin the formal part of this training, we'd like to share Miami University's land acknowledgement.
Miami University maintains a strong reciprocal relationship with the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma.
Our land acknowledgement exists to reaffirm the Miami people's deep connection to their homelands and our commitment to each other.
The specific wording in Miami University's land acknowledgement is the result of an intentional collaborative process with the Miami Center and with review and approval from the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma. As we begin, we'd like to share this land acknowledgement with you.
Miami University is located within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who, along with other indigenous groups, ceded these lands to the United States in the First Treaty of Greenville in 1795.
The Miami people whose name our university carries were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846.
In 1972, our relationship between Miami University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at Miami University in 2001.
The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami Tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of Miami language and culture and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people.
Miami University and the Miami Tribe are proud of this work.
As we get started, I want to make clear that we're going into this with the understanding that we're all committed to being objective in judging candidates based on their credentials. There's no doubt about that. At the same time, we also know that there's plenty of research evidence that very clearly shows how biases we've developed over the course of our lives inform not only our lives outside work, but also our review of candidates. We can't suspend or eliminate all our biases, so we want to focus on how we can be intentional about recognizing, anticipating, and mitigating against our biases. And we can do this by being aware and accountable as a group and individually. Let me provide some examples. When we talk about fit or collegiality, these are charged terms, because the discussion is often not about credentials or criteria everyone agrees upon, but about our own personal comfort levels with the gendered, racialized, and/or other identities of the candidate. If you find yourselves discussing someone's fit or collegiality, please pause to ask yourselves what exactly is meant by that. At Miami, we have faculty, staff, and students from all 50 U.S. states and over 79 countries. We are fortunate to have a wealth of linguistic diversity within the Miami community. Similarly, candidates may exhibit regional variations of speech in English, in accents, and other linguistic diversity. Based on our upbringing or stereotypes we've been exposed to and have learned, we may exhibit bias towards certain individuals whom we perceive to speak differently than what we are accustomed to, and this is something we want to be aware of during the search process. In looking at CVs or resumes, which we may consider to be central to our objective discussions, we also tend to show biases. For instance, you may have heard of studies in which identical CVs of academics were reviewed by other academics. One CV had a traditionally male name and the other a traditionally female name. And both men and women reviewers were more likely to rate the male applicant better or higher on teaching, research, and service. There have also been similar studies of CVs in which the only difference was the name of the school, Ivy League versus a lower ranked, or an HSI, or an HBCU, or the names of candidates were interpreted as being ethnic or foreign. Letters of recommendation are another common area in which our biases come out. For example, letters for men tend to be longer, tend to repeat standout adjectives like outstanding and excellent, and they tend to include more references to the candidate's CV and publications. Letters for women tend to be shorter, use a different set of adjectives like conscientious, meticulous, and hardworking, and they may include more references to personal life. And even if we're not using letters of recommendation, but rather reference calls, we want to encourage you to consider how gender and other forms of bias may impact our evaluation of candidates. For example, there is research that shows that we tend to focus more on personality traits than on accomplishments when discussing a woman's qualifications as compared to when discussing a man's qualifications. Overall, whether in letters or calls, we tend to have similarity bias, whereby we identify with and therefore more highly rank individuals we identify with than those who are different from us. This means we tend to give lower ratings for those who are different from us. So overall, there tend to be biases that appear, according to available research, about racial minorities, women, especially women who are parents, LGBTQIA plus people with disabilities, immigrants, those from less prestigious institutions, and candidates whose work is outside the center of their discipline, which can prevent us seeing exciting new areas, including interdisciplinary areas. We still have a lot of work to do in spite of good intentions, so it's important that we hold ourselves and each other accountable through a transparent process. One way to support a transparent process would be to create very clear criteria as a committee. Before you begin reviewing applicants' materials, the committee should convene and create a list of criteria. Begin with essential criteria, like can teach X courses and other critical pieces that are important aspects of the role and needs within the department. Then, go into developing highly desirable criteria, like it would be great if they can also teach Y or other valuable pieces that are not critical aspects of the role. For example, you may want to write up all the criteria on the board and ask, is there any other criteria anyone here wants to use? So, if someone says, well, it would be ideal if the person comes from a top 20 or top 10 program, then as a committee, you should discuss this and ask, what exactly and specifically are we looking for when we use that as a criteria? Because again, it's hidden criteria based on our biases of what is good or a fit that often comes in as hidden criteria. To reiterate, having biases means that we are often drawn to people who are like us in some way, or who went to an institution like the one we went to. Therefore, we need to be clear about why we are evaluating someone a certain way to avoid hidden criteria. Once the committee has finalized the criteria, everyone in the committee should stick to these criteria during the review of the candidate material and interviews. By following these pre-established criteria, we avoid hidden criteria, which is often where biases come in.
Now we will transition into the diversity statement and question part of the presentation. To begin, we would like to restate that diversity, equity, and inclusion are core values of the institution. Incorporating diversity statements or a diversity question helps to not only demonstrate the institution's commitment to our core values, it also allows us to explore how we want to incorporate DEI in our day-to-day work. At Miami, we have both a diversity statement and a diversity question. Positions that are classified as assistant director and above complete diversity statements, while all other staff will have a diversity question. Diversity statements are about 1 page in length and would be uploaded by applicants, whereas the diversity question would be incorporated in the application process and would be a few sentences. Applicants should focus on past and future contributions to DEI and fully address the question. The focus should not only be on what they have done, but ideas/recommendations they have on how they can engage with DEI work. We are seeking candidates that have a deep investment in moving DEI forward in a multitude of ways, so it will be important to have a broad lens when reviewing them. At the moment, all faculty searches are required to have diversity statements to be in alignment with the core values of the institution. This is a movement nationally, not only with faculty, but also staff positions. Therefore, Miami University is striving to be in alignment with national trends, as well as live out its core values of diversity, equity, and inclusion found in the Miami Rise strategic plan. Moreover, research shows that a more diverse workplace is a better workplace, more competitive, successful, and innovative than non-diverse ones. They have better team problem-solving abilities and exhibit less intergroup anxiety precisely because they include different ways of thinking and different backgrounds. It's clear that the way to thrive is to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive, yet our biases often get in the way. As was mentioned before, diversity, equity, and inclusion are core values at Miami University. Therefore, it is important to ensure we properly address any misconceptions about diversity statements or the diversity question. To begin, we want to reinforce that diversity statements/question are not about someone's identity or an autobiography. Poorly written responses are ones who only share their social identities and or provide a narrative of their life story. A good diversity statement, on the other hand, would include a candidate's commitment to DEI and examples of how they can or have contributed to supporting these efforts. Lastly, diversity statements are not political tests. Someone's political ideology has no bearing on the search process. Candidates should not be asked to disclose their political affiliation, nor should it be used in the evaluation of materials if it is included in the diversity statement. The focus on diversity statements or the question should be to have candidates reflect on how they will contribute to the institution's core values of DEI, as well as our community, to consider how our respective work intersects with the institution's DEI efforts. Some common approaches candidates may take are: show what they have done and what they can do moving forward, exploring the potential of what they could do based on their understanding of the position or higher education. This is especially true for individuals who are earlier on in their career. Candidates' vision for how to contribute to diversity broadly in the future within the field/discipline or nationally in higher education more broadly. However, what typically happens is that sometimes candidates pull different elements from each approach listed above. There is no one way for a candidate to approach a diversity statement or diversity question. As long as the candidate anchors their narrative around their commitment and contributions to DEI, they can approach it in any way they want. In addition, there may be candidates who share some of their social identities while others do not disclose at all. Ultimately, diversity statements and the diversity question are not about disclosing our gender, racial/ethnic, and or other identities. Therefore, the disclosure or lack of disclosure should not be included in the evaluation process of diversity statements. In thinking about best practices when evaluating diversity statements and a diversity question, we strongly encourage you to review these materials alongside the other materials submitted by the candidates. Diversity statements should not be relegated to the end of the review of a candidate's materials or separate from a candidate's other materials. We also recommend that you attempt to infuse diversity questions along the hiring process, including DI questions during the Zoom/phone interview and on-campus interview. Incorporating this additional layer demonstrates to candidates the institution's investment in DEI, as well as it informs the committee of the candidate's possible contributions to DEI if hired. We have a list of possible questions included in the resource section. Lastly, to help with this evaluation process, it will be important to create a rubric. The Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion has one available that is a great starting point for any committee. This file can be accessed by checking the resource section. The rubric we provide as an example has 5 major areas: understanding in DEI in higher education, research and research practices, teaching and mentoring, collaboration and leadership, and service engagement and or outreach. Each of these sections have a robust list of ways to assess a candidate's proficiency in that area. Some of the items may not fit the scope or responsibilities of the position, so make sure to modify it to fit the expectations of the position based on the position description. Also be mindful of which type of the distinction of length between a diversity statement and a diversity question. A candidate is able to share more and explain their experiences in greater detail in a diversity statement compared to the diversity question, which would only be a few sentences. So ensure the rubric takes this into account when developing the items in the categories you select. As we think about ways candidates can address the diversity statement, it might be easier to look at this question in two parts. For example, in the prompt it says, share how you are prepared to work in an environment with people from diverse cultures / different from your own. The search committee could look for how applicants define diversity and how they engage with difference in the workplace. Examples of how they have acted in the past when coming in contact with individuals from different backgrounds would also be a great way to address this part of the prompt. The second part of the question discusses your contributions or potential contributions to the university's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are looking for applicants who have looked at Miami's Statement on Diversity, which can be found in the resource section for your reference. Then look for examples of how they will contribute to empowering students and fellow colleagues to promote diversity. This is also a good way to look at how the applicants discuss initiatives involving diversity, especially diversity initiatives happening in the department they are applying to. This would also mean that search committee members need to be aware of the diversity initiatives and programming in the unit that applicants are applying to. Examples of past initiatives / projects which have supported moving forward DEI efforts at their previous work environment would also be good ways to address this part of the prompt. For the diversity question, you want to look for ways an applicant is aware of what Miami stands for and its commitment to DEI efforts, as well as their own level of comfort with diversity and their willingness to learn more. With this question, depending on the level of the position, the applicant may provide insights or thoughts on how their role could support DEI efforts in their unit, department, or the institution. Prior to the interview, make sure the committee has discussed what their commitment to diversity is. Make sure everyone can speak to that. Also ensure that all committee members have a baseline understanding of some DEI resources on campus so everyone is able to speak to this if candidates ask you during the interview. Also consider the individuals the candidate will meet with. Are there interview sessions for the candidate to connect with individuals who can provide support or resources? The individuals and/or groups selected for the interviews tell the candidates about the university and the climate on campus. Lastly, feel free to share the one-pager for affinity groups and the cultural resource guide found in the resource section. These are simple ways to show there are spaces outside of the unit that offer community building for candidates and offer them resources to explore how they can live in our community. We have the following Google document, Inclusive Interviewing, which can be accessed by visiting the resource section. Some simple recommendations that can be found in the document are incorporating DEI questions throughout the interview process, round 1, round 2, etc. We would also recommend for virtual interviews to copy and paste questions into the chat feature on Zoom to allow candidates to be able to read the questions as they are read aloud. However, if this is done for one candidate, it should be done for all candidates to ensure consistency in the interview process. We also encourage committees to include building names in the on-campus itinerary so candidates are able to research where they will be interviewing throughout the day. In this way, they are able to make personal determinations on shoe wear, clothing, and any possible accommodations they may need. And when thinking about supporting a candidate with accommodations, we ask that you use the language on the OEO website. So please disregard the information under the heading Offer Accessibility Accommodations because OEO has explicit language that should be used for all searches. Outside of this one note, the document offers some great examples and resources for supporting inclusive practices in virtual and in-person interviews. Please take some time to review the examples listed and see what approaches can be incorporated into your search. In addition to best practices and approaches to supporting an inclusive interview, we want to make sure to share some Miami University rules that all search committee members must adhere to. First, please remember that committee members cannot apply for this position or write a letter for an applicant specifically for this position. When it comes to internal candidates, please do not include someone in the pool simply as a courtesy or because they are here. Courtesy interviews are not a good idea for anyone involved. Only include someone if they meet the search criteria. Additionally, please keep in mind that only the hiring manager can contact references. There are no exceptions to that. Similar to references, some folks like to search on social media, but please remember that whatever you see in a Google search, you cannot unsee, even if it is wrong information which biases you against the candidate. So please do not Google folks unless one of two exceptions comes up. First, let us say a candidate put on their CV that they presented at X conference, but you were there and you do not remember seeing their session. You can check the conference website to verify this information. The second exception would be if, let us say, 3 applicants out of a pool of 10 candidates included professional websites. If you wanted to review all 3 applicants' websites and all committee members committed to this review, that would be appropriate. However, you would not be able to review one person's website and not others who had submitted websites as well. The goal is to ensure consistency in the review of candidate materials at all times. And as a side note, there is no expectation that the committee outreach to the remaining 7 candidates in this example to get their websites. If they did not submit it and you reviewed the other 3 candidates and everyone on the committee did so, you would have ensured consistent review of materials that were submitted by all candidates. Lastly, confidentiality. Without exception, all search committee meeting discussions must remain confidential. No committee conversations, evaluations, or assessments of applicants should be discussed outside of these meetings. Thank you for your time in this training, and know that we are here if you have any questions. Everyone in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion is here to support you and your colleagues in your search process. If you have any questions or want to talk through a situation, please feel free to reach out to anyone on our team.